Hi everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Near Future podcast. This is Jonny and Tom. We're checking in after another week of AI action in the world and for us. So we're going to get straight into it once again. And one thing that we have tried to do since our last recording is become a little bit more professional and build a bit of a content pipeline or topic pipeline for our own podcast, so we're not scrambling around trying to find topics to talk about. So Tom, do you want to talk about the our strategy so
approach?
far?
It's incredibly basic. Imagine a Slack channel.
Zero AI involved in it.
Zero AI so far. Just imagine a Slack channel, and then we have a thread in there that just captures up things we find across the week that we might want to talk about or might be interesting to talk about. But I think maybe the irony or the interesting learning we had is we started this a week ago. The first thing that enters that channel is the news of Anthropic releasing Fable 5. And then within days it was banned in the UK where we're recording this, or banned in, I guess, every country outside the US. So what quickly turned from a potentially interesting topic to talk about has sort of evolved into questions about European sovereignty and these questions of where are AI tools built and where they who controls, who has access to them, which may actually lead us onto one of the topics we wanted to talk about today. But that is a quick overview of our amazingly high-tech content pipeline topic generator thing, and maybe in the future that will lead to something that we can actually use AI to I don't know, pull together more of a cohesive approach to. But right now it's a grab bag of things. So anyway, on the topic of topics to talk about, how about sovereignty as a theme, Jonny? And I know you shared with me earlier in the week about Europe 2031, which is I would love for you to tell us a bit about, and then perhaps we can talk through some reflections on that.
Yeah, and I think sovereignty is an enormous question at the moment right now. Sovereignty has not been something that a lot of people, I think, have wanted to necessarily talk about, or it's been a very difficult topic. And I feel like over the last maybe 6 months, but especially this week, it's become something else entirely. We're seeing an enormous amount of power accrue to very few people around this new technology that's emerging. In fact, the other thing that happened this week is XAI, SpaceX went public. Elon Musk became the first trillionaire in the world. And straight after that, he bought Cursor, who I think we're going to talk about potentially in later on, but Cursor, which is one of the most popular IDEs, and they're building models, and now they're building models using all of Elon's compute, and actually even more of the ecosystem around how software is built and where it lives and what it does accrues to one man, literally one man. So that's fine as long as that person is benevolent and exists in an ecosystem and a democracy that is fair, and in a country that wants to do business with the rest of the world and believes in, I suppose, like the modern form of capitalism and globalism in the way that we've sort of built over the last 20, 30 years. But we also have an American president who is erratic and an American government that doesn't feel like that at the moment as well. So that has sort of been the backdrop. And then this so that resulted in Fable, which is, if you aren't as AI obsessed as us, was Anthropic, who built Claude, Claude's latest model, which is extraordinarily powerful, and within 4 days it was banned by the US government for all non-US citizens. So they basically turned it off for everyone. Not even the Americans get it yet, because they haven't worked out how to even block it for some people and not others. Even internal employees of Anthropic aren't allowed to use it if they're not US citizens. So it was completely mad, and it will probably we'll get access again somehow, and they'll work it out. But it signals this enormous risk that we are subject to by being receivers of technology rather than creators of technology in this space specifically. So Europe 2031, which is like a 2-hour podcast or 2-hour narrative to listen to, and 18,000 words. So enormous sort of mini story, basically a mini novella, tells this story of AI from about this time last year, or February 2025. It follows the existing players, and then it switches into the future, and those existing players disappear, and we start following these fictional companies and fictional people as they navigate Europe's place in this AI-driven world over the next 10 years. And it paints a pretty dystopian future. I think some criticism of the story has been it is a little bit hand-wringy and extreme, possibly. But it's all based on real things that have happened and could happen. So I listened to it, and then you listened to it, Tom, and there's a couple of things that I took from this narrative, and I would recommend anyone listening who's interested in this stuff, and especially Europeans, do listen to or read it themselves. Europe2031.ai, I think is the URL. It's completely free, but it sort of paints this story of skepticism around the technology and waiting for the bubble to burst, and bureaucracy for sure across the EU that leads to some investment, but always too late and never quite enough, and a big bet on being able to build something within the EU despite all the limitations of compute and all of these other geopolitical challenges. And they basically never quite achieve it. They never are able to compete on a technological level, and there's no plan B. So Europe ends up caving to, or being put in a nightmare scenario where they have to choose between American and Chinese technology, and take a side in this technology war, effectively, that the two new powers are waging against each other. And it doesn't end up with a good situation for Europe. There's no growth, and there's no control. It becomes effectively a vassal state of the US. So, yay, fun times. It's not actually happened yet, and there is a chapter at the end which effectively describes some of the things that they could have done in this narrative to avoid this situation. But it's sobering, and necessarily so. I think, if you live, it's more about the EU than Europe, including the UK. So the UK is sort of left out of it and gets one footnote, which is they did better than us. But I think we're in the same situation. Europe has exactly one frontier lab of note, Mistral, and we're not currently developing any others, or they're so early that they're not sort of worth noting. And to catch up on that technological front is very difficult. One of the other things, or the sort of narrative points that I really took away from it, was at some point open models lost. So I think the Chinese were developing open models in this story, and then they decided they didn't want to. The models got good enough that they wanted to keep them to themselves and not actually give them to their enemies. And so therefore, as soon as Chinese incentives switched away from open weights and models that others could use, Europe and presumably all the other countries that were relying on open models stopped. Their progress completely stopped because they had no way of actually developing that technology themselves. So I think it was a sort of big tacit vote in favor of open models, actually. But even an open weight model, or a company that is dedicated to that, if they're not benevolent, or they're not within your control, then anything can happen, and that can be taken away. So yeah, that was talked for a long time. I'm aware there. Tom, was there anything I missed, or anything that you want to react to?
Maybe just like a couple of points just to bring I think a lot of what you mentioned there is about politics and economics and geopolitics even. Uh, that might feel a bit distant for people to wrap their head around. What does this mean for somebody who is using ChatGPT to help them write meeting notes up more neatly, or or using Claude Code in their day job? What are some concrete tactical takeaways people might be able to imagine in how this sort of theoretical story might apply to them in a few years' time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if your only interface with AI today is using it personally to get ideas for presents for your cousin or write you a new recipe for roast chicken, then I mean that could go, but I think actually the models that exist today are fine for that kind of thing anyway. So you probably wouldn't ever lose access to that. You might have to get it from a different place or pay a different amount of money for it. But in a professional context, I think more and more what we're seeing is companies are leaning into this and building AI into the core of how businesses work and how they function. And some of that then means they reduce headcount, and those people in those roles change their skill set, so they can't actually ultimately do the jobs they were doing previously before. There's no training for graduates and younger employees, and graduate employment's down. So those kind of things then have second and third order consequences around the ability of companies and therefore society to function without this technology. So if the more we become dependent on this technology, the harder it would be to exist without it. And I think a lot of the effects are non-obvious, and actually maybe only still emergent now. You know, if AI was taken away today, it'd probably be fine, I would guess. But that muscle memory disappears over time. So the longer we leave it, the more challenging it would be. I also, this narrative is, I don't think there's any situation where AI goes away, probably, I would guess. But, for example, your information diet being fed to you by people that don't have your best interests at heart is a real risk. AI being used to influence elections and all sorts of things like that. You need to be able to combat that. You need to be able to have some way of at least understanding what's happening to you. And if you're going into a gunfight with a knife, then that's going to be very challenging. So, yeah, it's hard to put. I mean, people should listen to this Europe 2031, because that paints one possible future, and it does describe some of these scenarios much better than I'm doing. But in terms of tactic, I'm not sure the right advice is to not use AI, honestly. But I think people could decide where they get their AI from in a more meaningful way. So, for example, Anthropic is considered a risk to the US government. They want to rip it out of all government departments and things like that. That means that Anthropic and Claude is a potential risk to us, because it might get taken away. They might change their strategy or have to change their strategy to fall in line. And generally, the big US tech companies, their incentives are unclear and probably not aligned with ours. So using open weight models, getting our models from Europe. So, for example, Mistral, you can use their technologies. Probably not state of the art, but it's good for a lot of things. And actually, if you use open weight models, you'll find that increasingly 90% of the work you need to do with AI is fully possible with these things. So download the Mistral app and use that for some of your AI questions, and see if you can get on on some of the open models through some of these other platforms, OpenRouter and things like that, and just see whether they feel good and what you can use them for, and don't build a full dependence on US technology. I feel like it sounds like I'm wearing my tinfoil hat, but I think that it's just pragmatic, actually, to at least know if you're not super reliant on it, maybe you don't need to do this. But as your reliance grows and you start to think, actually, there's some critical things that I'm using this for, then reliance on any one party that you don't feel that confident you control or has your best interest at heart is a risk.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. I think one of my takeaways from listening to Europe 2031 was it's, I think, quite commonly understood at the moment that the speed of AI acceleration right now will only increase and only get faster over the coming years. But I think there's this aspect of the sort of existing mental models and incentives for each of the actors in this game will only reinforce the differences between these regions and between these countries potentially, even if in the scenario laid out in the story, the US has no bad intentions. These are the natural consequences of structure and set of incentives that encourage a certain way of approaching their AI development at the frontier labs. So yeah, super interesting, very thought-provoking, and I think the Fable 5 turning it off for everyone outside of a country, I think just highlights, oh yeah, if Claude stopped working tomorrow, and in this future that they're describing in the story, the sort of arc, I'd say, was around the speed of AI development is sort of self-reinforcing, but then that requires more compute, and more compute means more. It's scarcer than before, and so why would a country want to share that more broadly with other places outside of their core audience? So yeah, fascinating, thought-provoking, and a really interesting topic as well. I don't think I've even really heard the word sovereignty before the last 6 months, but I think it's fascinating to think about. There's sort of not a flip side, but a couple of other sort of news pieces that have come up recently. You mentioned Cursor earlier. Cursor have just announced over the last week that they're building an office in London. They have a headcount proposal of 200 people that they want to add. And then I've also just been curious recently, like Google DeepMind is obviously based in London, and when DeepMind was acquired by Google, Demis Hassabis had one of the terms of that deal was about retaining a London team and how important that was to the running of DeepMind. And I think now potentially London has helped cultivate an era of technical talent because of that contract deal with Google that has now had this interesting knock-on effect of AI companies considering London somewhere that has a lot of top talent because of that investment that Demis and DeepMind seeded in the community. So curious if you have any reflections on that, Jonny, based on the Cursor news, the sort of seeding of talent in London. Let's not go down the path of comparing London with Europe, but I'm curious, sort of generally, as London as a hub, if you have any thoughts on the sort of growing talent community here, or sort of talent outside of the US for this stuff.
Yeah, I'm about to move house to Hertfordshire, sunny Hertfordshire, which is under half an hour into Euston, and King's Cross, Euston Road sort of area is really where a lot of the London AI stuff is happening. You've got Google and Anthropic and OpenAI, I think, and various other labs that are setting up shop there and planning on growing their London teams. It's really exciting, and I think, yeah, you do wonder, it's a sort of butterfly flaps its wings moment. If Demis had said, I'll just move to SF, where would we be now? And again, another reminder that, the actions of so few people, positive and negative, can impact so many downstream. But I think I'm bullish on London. I think I've been London maxing. I went to the first London maxing event. It was great, and hopefully we'll go to many more. And I think that Europeans are really terrible for, including Londoners, are really terrible for underplaying things and only spotting the negative. And I think there is a huge potential for lots of opportunities for people in our world, but also growth, economic growth, and excellence, and invention, and all of the things that we're good at, I think, here. And Cambridge and Oxford are a big part of it as well. I think Cambridge is the second densest AI talent in the world. SF is first. And that's quite impressive, that it's such a hotbed there. I can't remember if Demis is Cambridge. I think he was potentially a Cambridge grad or postgrad or something like that.
I think he has strong connections there. And I know he goes there a lot, but I don't know the exact history.
Yeah. It's good. That's the strange dualism of all of this, and I think AI generally, and where I think we try and keep a nuanced view of it. I don't think this podcast and our existence is about pushing AI on people necessarily. It's about navigating the change that is happening around you. And I think we're seeing two sides of that. We're seeing this new hegemony growing around AI, which is bad. I think bad. We get great technical and technological benefits from it in the short term, but it is not good to see concentration of power. But at the same time, all of the benefits are fascinating. And what new drug discovery can we do? And what new benefits to humanity will come out of this? Probably very many. And so it's an endlessly fascinating topic, but not obviously good or bad. It just is, and then the rest is what we make of it.
So true. Those are some good deep thoughts for today's episode. Sorry, you're gonna say something else, Jonny?
No, I was going to just ask you, so one thing that we did put in the content channel, we did achieve, or I achieved putting one thing in the content channel, which is a Twitter thread about, I'm going to change the subject basically, just to warn you, which is a Twitter thread about how you build a business in the AI era as an AI-led business. So I suppose this is like us talking shop or exploring what near future is live as a business. But I think we're seeing two things. One is like training stuff, people really want to upskill. They want their teams to upskill. They want people to come in and show people the art of the possible and all of that kind of stuff, which is great. And then there's separately buying capability directly, which is like, come and build agents for us, or come and build AI products for us, or level up our team by being inside it on some level. And they are outwardly maybe the same, or look quite similar. And you see lots of people and lots of companies offering both, but they're such different sort of activities and areas of speciality on the inside. And I remain not entirely convinced that a company, definitely a person, but a company can do both really well. So I'm interested in your thoughts, Tom, predictions maybe for us, but also thoughts generally on a new business model, an emergent business model for this era, or where do you think we're all going?
I don't want to overclaim where I think we're all going, but I do think since we've been working together in this AI capacity for over a year now, I feel like one of the most interesting aspects of working in this space together has been on this question of what is our business model and how does it evolve, and that's gone from everything from purely focusing on workshops around AI adoption through to helping build out teams, build out and staff teams, through to more graduate level supporting people coming into the workforce and helping train them up, or coach or mentor into this sort of new era, or expanding more experienced product ways of working into fresh, energetic young talent. And so there's that, and there's many others in between. But I think there's this interesting tension between when we talk with potential companies that we work with, or even just friends in design. Like, are you a consultancy, or are you like, what do you guys do? Do you run workshops? Are you consultants? Are you what are you doing? The thread that you specifically shared, Jonny, was I forget who the person was who, so maybe we can add it to the show notes. But the original question was the an advisor to startups about how to determine whether you're an AI services business or not comes purely down to how you charge money. And if you're charging a day rate or an hourly rate, you are basically an AI services business. But if you charge based on outputs or outcomes, or other more nuanced form of charging, that has a huge impact that sort of underpins the rest of the business that you build. And so I think for us, we've been sort of gone back and forth a bit on that. And some clients we've worked with have been day rates, and others have been on a sort of project-based fee. I don't really know the answer, but I think the flexibility within that space, or sort of exploring it, letting that expand what we're doing, I think is a really interesting space to be as a business. I think on the one hand, it can look like we don't know what we're doing because we don't have a very clear answer to it. But on the other, I think that is the nature of operating in this space, and things are moving very quickly, and being adaptable and really focused on driving like what is the core value that you're delivering, and helping teams unlock what they want to be doing with that. I think is a better North Star, in my opinion. Like, who is the audience and what is the value you're adding as a focus, and then the specifics of the business model fall out of that. Having said all that, though, I've been on the weekend. I was a friend. A friend is a creative director, design director at a type design studio called Grilly Type. My friend Jacob Heffman also has another podcast which you should check out called I think it's called Makes Noises. No, works but makes noises. I think that's the name of it. Anyway, some cool yellow artwork. Yes, so he is he's a design director there, and anyway, I chatted with him recently, and I was sort of thinking about the nature of the Type Foundry as a business, and how there is this sort of retail fonts side where I think most people are familiar with Type Foundries for like, oh, they made this font and I can buy that font through the website, and actually you're not really buying the font, you're buying the license to use the font. But then there is this whole other side of many Type Foundries, which is around custom type, or adapting typefaces, or building completely custom type for brands that want that or need that. So there is this inherent symbiosis between these two elements of the business. There is like making cool stuff that people want, and then there is, because of that, you build a reputation around what that cool stuff is, and then people come to you to help adapt and modify what that is to use in more unique brand applications. I don't think the space we're in is like super applicable, but I think there is some element to having something that is more public facing, that is a bit more like people have a clearer picture of what they're getting, and there's a piece of what you're offering that is available to a wider audience. And then there is a more sort of bespoke, tailored experience that is around getting much deeper into the nuances of how a team or a company specifically operates. And I think there is sort of a shared language around that. But I think the thing with Type Foundries that I think is kind of interesting is, and I'm definitely not an expert in this, I'm just sort of observing from the outside, but it seems like there's it takes a long time for a tech foundry to build up a base of retail fonts that are going to make enough money to be a sustainable business. So there's sort of this cat and mouse or back and forth between those two aspects of it to like get enough of a baseline where you can and enough of a reputation to persist on the retail font side.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And it's a great parallel because the way we started a year ago was with ticketed events, and there almost definitely is a way to fairly quickly make enough money as a 2-person organization to run ticketed events and do that as the whole thing you're doing. But that only works if that's all you want to do. And I think we quite quickly realized that that wasn't all we wanted to do. And so then how much do you do that knowing that it's a loss leader or it's even marketing versus, really leaning into it. And I think that's something that we talked about a fair amount, I suppose, is what do we put out into the world for that's very accessible, cheap, free, resources, etc. Versus what do we keep for ourselves? I'm sure that is, in fact, I know that is true of every business everywhere. In my previous guys as a SaaS founder, it was what's in the free tier, what's available to everyone. Is it free resources that aren't the product? Is it a part of the product, or is it just our wise words on our blog that we're giving away for free? So, but then when it comes to, you're right, in this thread, it speaks about exchanging time for money versus more value-based pricing, and being conscious about where you're going to end up is important. But at the same time, we're so new, we just got to muddle through a bit and see what works and see there's pros and cons to each. If you say a number and then it turns out it was harder than you thought, then you lose your shirt. Whereas if you price by time, then the incentives aren't really as well aligned with your client or whatever it is. So it is just muddling through, and neither of us have run a consultancy before, so we're learning stuff that many people have learned over many years, many times before, some of whom may listen to this and roll their eyes, but here we go. It's a fun journey.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of a blessing and a curse to have not done this before, in the sense of I think being too rigid about how to operate or what a business model looks like right now, I think is potentially a limiting belief as well at this moment in time. I do think we also keep coming back to these 3 pillars in the work that we're doing. There's the working with leaders on shaping strategy and helping leadership teams, exec teams align on and figure out what is relevant for them in terms of tooling, infrastructure, what kind of investments to make today versus later. There is the hearts and minds work of running workshops, running enablement programs, empowering people across the team to help level up in the work that they're doing and weaving AI into how they're operating. And last of all, there is the building piece, which I think is really part of our DNA as builders and makers of things. Like, we're both designers by background, but I think making is a really important part for both of us in that process. So I think that is kind of a complex picture for many people to be like, oh, so do we hire you as, like, are you basically freelancers that we bring in to build something with AI? Or do you come and run workshops? Anyway,
Yes,
we've talked enough about this, but I think it's a really interesting space to keep fluid and be open to ideas. I think the other challenging aspect of this is that companies also don't really know many companies don't have a clear idea of exactly what they need, other than, we're getting pressure to do more with AI. Can you come and help us do that? Which is not a bad starting point, but then I think it really leads to the interesting unpacking of that question and what that really means for the business. And I think we have found that the questions we've had with companies we've worked with where we've been building real tools has led to conversations that are much more focused on the alternatives to us doing that. And that could be using an existing product which has its own licensing fees and annual renewal rates, or it could be hiring extra people to run a certain function because it's very inefficient in the way it's set up right now. There's different avenues there. Anyway, let's move on. I know we're tight on time. I did. Let's. Should we jump to the end?
Well,
What do you think?
I did have a seamless transition that I can
Oh,
attempt at this point.
okay, perfect. That's so
From what,
professional.
what do you give away for free? Transitioning to something that you're working on, Tom,
Oh, yeah.
which we've talked about for ages, and finally, well, a few things have happened this week actually in our world. One of which is we put our website live, and it's still a work in progress, but it's better than it was, and it's actually has words on it and things like that. So we're using modern technology like words and pictures. There's still a way to go. We haven't got any real case studies or anything like that up on there yet, but it's progress. And this podcast can now be found on that website. Maybe you found this podcast episode on our website, so you know this already. But Tom, what else are you building?
Thanks for that update, by the way. And I wanted to, hearing you say that makes me think we should have a convert to caveman button where you can convert all the copy on a website into caveman speak. Like
Ship it. I'll get an agent on
things. Okay, so what have I been working on? So I've been working on an open source design frame that helps people who are building these one-off micro design tools to do things as part of their work and basically consolidate them, pull them all together into a single coherent product-like experience. So imagine Figma, but a really stripped down minimalist version of Figma that has a consistent UI sidebar with consistent controls and interactions, and then a selector at the top where you can choose between the different tools you've built, and then this panel on the right, which is the tool. And I've been building a bunch of tools this way to create visual assets for things we've been doing as near future, dithered gradients and information design treatments for dithered circles and shapes and things. But I think it's just a really fun way of working too. So we had a conversation earlier this week about it, and that kind of lit the fire under me to spend a bunch of time actually moving this forward. And yeah, it's exciting. I feel both completely out of my depth at running an open source project or sort of preparing to launch an open source project. And I'm sure I've made many etiquette fails, and I'm going to be criticized by any sensible software developer on anything that I'm doing. But at the same time, I think it's been a really good experience just to go through the process of, oh, I want to package this up. What's the most useful way I can do that? And Claude Code has been helping coach me through the process and talking about MIT licenses and what kind of stuff to put in a README file and all of this. But I think the core of this idea, I've just told you about the what, but the why for it came from a workshop that we ran a month or 2 months ago with a big global fintech company, where we helped them help 60 designers across the team build 60 individual design tools in 3 hours. And it was this workshop format that really resonated for what they were doing. And we saw some incredible results off the back of it, these amazing tools that were built and shipped. But the idea of what could companies do, what could teams do, or even what could individuals do if they had this approach which encouraged these super custom tools that helped them design things that were unique to how they operated. And so I still find that idea really inspiring. And so the whole architecture of this project is based on the idea that each of these tools can operate on its own. So you can just drop, it's basically an HTML file with JavaScript and CSS. So I could literally send over Slack you an HTML file, and then you could download it and double click on it and it will work as a design tool. But you could also add it into this frame, and then it sort of collects them all together and allows you to switch between them. So the key is that it's super local, super portable, super lightweight, and very frictionless. You don't need to do npm install. You don't need to have a server running. You can do that, and there might be some benefits if you did do that. But it should be as simple as downloading a zip of this GitHub repo, double clicking on it, and then just running an index file, and then everything is available to you. And you can just point Claude at it and have Claude build your own design tools. So yeah, it's been really fun to put together, and I'm sure once it's released more openly, it will be humbling to see what people complain about or whatever. But yeah, super cool.
I think loads of complaints will be a good sign. It means people are excited about it.
That is true. Very true.
The thing, I haven't tried it yet. I'm very excited to. The thing I'm excited about, especially, and this was sort of a build on what we did in that workshop, is how lo-fi it is. I think, if you ask Claude to build a website, it's going to start with a package.json with like React and Vite and all of this other stuff that it sort of builds this dependency tree and Tailwind and blah, blah, blah. And actually, you don't need any of that stuff. Like the fact that this is an HTML file means someone on a computer that isn't allowed to run a single command in terminal, that isn't allowed to open a single website that it doesn't trust, that person should be able to get some value out of this HTML file. And it's so simple. Like HTML has been around for decades, but it's still what everything compiles to. When you build your mad React thing, it ends up as HTML in one great big file anyway. So it's just cool to advocate for something that is so simple and a simple piece of technology, but that can actually do all of the things that we wanted to do. We could put one example of something that we built. It's maybe an earlier version. We could put it in the show notes, which is our like dithered shape generator thing, which is live on the internet. So we could post that somewhere in the meantime. But looking forward to this going live.
Yeah, so true. And last thing, it was named, or current working title is Kazam, named after the Kazam machine by Charles and Ray Eames. That was the invention required to invent the thing they actually wanted to invent. And I really like the idea of helping give tool builders the tool to unlock more tool building. So whether they use this to do that, or just this is something that is encouraging of them to build their own unique tools, or they sort of download it, rip it apart, try something completely different. Yeah, that's all fine. The goal is raising the bar for craft and having craft win and explore all these new angles that are now possible. So
brilliant.
With that, let's wrap up.
Let's wrap. Thank you, Tom. Another episode in the can, and see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.